Hello. Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? Oh, my God. Everyone's very flat. How are you doing? Do you want to be here? No? No one. Okay, let's just check who's in the audience. I'm a psychologist. I'm a performance coach. I travel the world. I coach the biggest Olympians, the best CEOs and sports winning teams. That's what I've been doing for 20 years. So today I'm here to give you some insight into the mind of a champion and how do you build a high-performance team. But as a psychologist, the first thing I like to do is get to know my audience. Now, I can't really see everyone too well because it's dark, but that's okay. We're going to try a little exercise. Okay. So I want everyone to put their hands up in the air like this. Great. Okay, everyone up there, beautiful. A little more energy than earlier on. Okay, squeeze your hands together. And I want you to cross your thumbs. Beautiful. Now, I want you to look at your thumb. And I want you to notice if your left is crossed over your right or your right is crossed over your left. Okay, everyone got that? So everyone whose right is crossed over the left, put your hands up. All right, let's see. So you guys are statistically in the top 50% of the most beautiful people on earth. And everyone whose left is crossed over the right, you are statistically in the top 50% of the most intelligent people on earth. Amazing. So now that we've got a profile of everyone, because this is what psychologists do, we profile you before anything else. You know, exactly like US immigration. And then we move ahead. So, my first introduction to high-performance teams and to leadership was something very, very unique. It's probably a lesson that I learned, and I spent about 20 years really understanding, mastering, and teaching this lesson. I'll tell you the story. I was 19 years old. I grew up in South Africa. And I couldn't play professional cricket because it was the apartheid, which was institutionalized segregation for people of color. So, which means there's no opportunity for us to play. So I chose to become a coach. I studied sports and exercise science. And my first mentor was an old gentleman by the name of Phil Russell. And the team was the Dolphins, the KwaZulu-Natal Dolphins. And in that team, who I was training with, that I happened to then become the high-performance coach of at the age of 19 was Sean Pollock, Andrew Hudson, Pat Simcox, John T. Rhodes, and a few others that were there. So, but something interesting happened. I walked into the first locker room meeting, and I joined them after 3 games had lapsed or passed, and the results weren't great. So they were debunking this whole situation, and every now and then, the energy popped up a lot, and the guys got a little aggressive. And then coach would say, boys, remember rule number 6. And then everything got quiet. And then they carried on talking, and then once in a while, the energy went up again, and he said, so rule number 6, and everything calmed down. So after the meeting had done, the next morning, I go to the ground, and I ask coach, I said, hey, coach, what's rule number 6? He says, rule number 6 is don't take yourself so seriously. I said, that's a great rule. And what's the other 5 rules? He says, there are no other rules. And I've remembered rule number 6, because rule number 6 is so important for every single one of us. And I have a long presentation. We probably won't finish it. But I'm going to be teaching you about the art of building a high-performance team and what is a high-performance team. Now, the first thing you must know is that when we take ourselves seriously, what do you bring to the front of every conversation? You bring your identity and you bring the expectation. Identity and expectation always disappoints. When you don't take yourself so seriously, when you're able to laugh and enjoy yourself, you open the door to possibility. And possibility will never, ever, ever disappoint. So that's the first thing we must learn about high-performance teams. So this is a picture of a bat, and bats are really, really interesting. If you look at this picture, they look exactly like bats. But if you switch it around, they look very, very different. They look a little, you can understand where the concept of Batman came in. Now, if you take this picture, for example, these are bats that are just going to sleep. Now, if you switch this picture around, they look like bats at a cocktail party. Now, the reason I showed this at the start of most presentations is because I like to spoil your idea of what a bat is. And from this moment on, you'll never see bats in the same way. Because the truth is that once you see something, you cannot unsee it. And the purpose of my presentation here is to get you to see what a high-performing team is differently, through a completely different lens. And once we start to look at things through a completely different lens, everything changes. There's a very powerful story. You know, I came from South Africa, and the most famous person coming out of South Africa is probably Nelson Mandela. Everyone knows him. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. Now, I tell people the reason South Africa is a free country is because he thought about freedom for 27 years. And the question I ask every single person, what are you going to be thinking about for 20 years? Because that will be your legacy. What you think about for 20 years will be your legacy. We were free because he thought about that. So many of you in this room are leaders. So the question you got to ask yourself is, what are you thinking about every single day? Are you thinking about your leadership style? Are you thinking about empowering people? Are you thinking about lifting them up? Or are you thinking about numbers that are changing every day and every quarter? Because what you think about is who you become. Ultimately, that's what it is. Okay, so we're going to go into the science of great teams. And the interesting thing about great teams is no one has ever taught us how to be a great team player, ever. Every one of you have probably gone to college, done multiple degrees. How many of you have done a course on building a great team? Hands up. I don't see one at the back. That's it. Great. How many of you have done a course on how to hire a great team player? Anyone? 1, 2. Great. Maybe 3 somewhere around. 3 people in a room of 1,200 have done a course. But yet, the expectation on us is A, to hire great teams, and B, be a great team player. Now, if I pulled any one of you out of the audience on the stage and gave you a guitar and asked you to play, you wouldn't be expected to get it right. Why? Because we never taught you that. So how is it that we expect you to be a great team player? And how is it that we expect you to hire great team players if you've never been taught that? Now, the reason I start by framing it in this way is because I want every one of us to understand that the first rule, rule number 6, don't take yourself so seriously, allows for us to be a little kinder to ourselves. And when we become a little kinder to ourselves, everything changes. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with a little bit of kindness. We're going to forget everything that happened, and we're going to try to rewire and reframe how we think about things. Now, there's a very, very beautiful thing about the human brain. I'm on the teaching team at Stanford Business School. I teach a course called The Neuroscience of Exemplary Leadership, where I teach leaders like yourself how the brain functions. And when you know how your brain functions, things become really, really extraordinary. Now, for example, I've got 2 random pictures here. This is an amazing experiment. One I've named A, and the other named B, just for the purposes of this experiment. So I'm going to give you 2 random sounds. The first one is Kiki. The second one is Baba. Okay, so if I asked you, who's Kiki, which one would you say? A. So hands up, A, Kiki. Look at that, huh? Most people. Great. So those who don't say A is Kiki is because you think it's a trick question, but it isn't. You know, A, most likely than not, should be Kiki, and that should be the default that your brain is thinking. If I asked you which one of these guys is angry, which would you say? A. The reason you would say A is because your brain associates negative emotions with sharp edges and happy emotions with round edges, and happy sounds with round edges, and sharp sounds with sharp edges. This is neuroscience. So when you understand neuroscience and you bring neuroscience into leadership, you realize it's not so difficult to become a great exemplary leader because you just have to understand how everyone else is thinking. And that is what we're going to try to deconstruct right now, right here. But the question I like to ask people is, what is the difference between a leader and a manager? Because if you want to build a high-performing team, and if you want to be an exceptional leader, you need to know the difference between these two. Well, many people give me a whole lot of textbook answers from experience, all of that, but it literally comes down to one thing. A manager is someone who applies a rule book, and a leader is someone who understands when to apply the exception to the rule. That's the leader's job. That's it. Simple, full stop. A leader is someone who understands when the exception to the rule applies. So the question we should reflect on as we start to think about high-performing teams is not about leadership style, but is about how are we allowing people the freedom to apply an exception to any rule that's currently in play. Because only that is allowing and cultivating that ability for them to think differently. Now, there are many, many factors and there are many recipes that make a great team. I've spent so many years in locker rooms of great, great teams, in boardrooms of great teams. If you ask me, what are the factors that make a great team? Honestly, there are too many to mention. But the thing is that we find a few things that are common in every great team. The factors may vary, the size may vary, everything may vary, but three things are really common in every great team. The first thing is they have clarity of thought. I'll tell you one example. I used to do a little bit of work with Mika Hakkinen, the F1 driver. And when he was driving, he'd tell me something really amazing. He told me, if we go into our entire organization, we have about 450 people that work in every department, from marketing to finance to technical to performance. And if you ask everyone, what's the purpose of this organization, everyone gives you the same answer. The answer is, we want a faster lap time. Because a faster lap time equals better results. So the accountant is thinking about how do I expedite a payment, and how does that expediting contribute to a faster lap time? The janitor is thinking about how does a clean floor. The person who's stacking the fridge is thinking about how early do I need to do that so that that water is chilled enough so that the person who drinks it can work better so that we can get a faster lap time. Clarity of purpose is the fundamental thing that builds high-performance teams. First one. The second one is great people. The All Blacks say this: great people make great people. I spent 8 years working with the Kenyan marathon teams, and we have that same philosophy. Good people make people great. You have to bring the best into an ecosystem because the best will push each other. And the third fundamental thing is process. Process over every single thing. And I'm going to touch a little bit about each one of these things. But the thing we should know is that great teams, the definition of a great team is they achieve more than what they think they could. But for a great team to achieve more than what they thought they could, they need a great leader. So these two go hand in glove. So we're going to talk about a little bit. We're going to give you a few examples, play a few videos, deconstruct the mindset behind a champion and the mindset behind great teams. So I would encourage you, anything resonates with you, take a picture, share it, use it, do whatever you want to. Hey, this is the South African rugby team. It's exceptional. I know India just won the World Cup after we lost about 9 in a row. But this team have won 50% of the World Cups they played in. Right? It's the best statistic in sport, in any sport in the world. 50% of the World Cups they played in, they have won. So what is the difference between them and everyone else? Well, the difference is very simple. It's an ideology. It's a mindset. This team walks onto the ground not to give their best, but to do what is needed. Now, this is the psychology of a high-performing, elite-performing unit. You don't walk on there saying, I will do my best, because sometimes your best may not be good enough, and that's a fact. Right? But when you go in with the mindset of, I'm going to do what is needed, then the obstacles don't matter anymore. So this is the first fundamental mind switch shift that every single one of us need to make. Because if you walk out every single day from bed and say, I'm going to give my best, and your best is very variable. You could be tired, you could have not slept, you could have been having all of these things, so your best is going to vary. But when you set a threshold and you say, I'm going to do everything that's possible to cross that threshold, then all of a sudden, nothing else matters. And once we start to adopt this here, life becomes significantly different. Now, how do we adopt that mindset? I spent 7 years traveling on the ATP tennis tour with many of your Indian legends, Mahesh Bhupathi, Sania Mirza, Leander Paes. I spent 3 Olympics with them traveling. Okay. And I saw these fingers a lot. These are the fingers of Rafa Nadal. Many of you recognize it. And I've got to tell you the story. This is exceptional. You know, Rafa tapes his fingers. So for those of you who like watching tennis, you'll notice that. But the thing about this taping is you never know if it's right until you hit a ball. You just never know if it feels perfect until you go and hit a few balls. So if you watch him, every now and then something happens. He gets on court, he starts warming up, and then a few minutes later, he comes and sits at the bench, takes it out, does it again. But the most exceptional thing is not that. It's what happens the following day. So the following day, if you happen to be in the locker room early enough, you would notice that he would come into the locker room about 2 to 2.5 hours before his practice or his match. 2 to 2.5 hours before he's there. And when you ask him, what are you doing here so early? He says, his answer is the most amazing thing. He says, maybe I did not give the physio enough time to get it right. Look at that. I want to say, maybe I did not give the physio enough time to get it right. Now, I've worked with many people who said the physio got it wrong. But there are very few people who say, maybe I did not give him the chance to get it right. And that is setting the foundation for excellence. Because the first thing about high-performing teams is a team is everyone coming together. But everyone needs to adopt that mindset of accountability and full responsibility for everything that happens. Now, we live in a very, very VUCA environment, and one of the biggest things that we're talking about, I lecture a lot about psychological safety to corporate teams like yourself be working. One of the biggest conundrums we have is how do I create a safe environment for people who are not producing? Fundamental, eternal problem. It'll always be there, But the thing with high-performing teams, the best teams in the world, every single person adopts this accountability, adopts this responsibility so much that they raise the bar and raise the bar and raise the bar. And what happens when every single person in an ecosystem is raising the bar is that high performers can't survive. They by themselves fall away. You don't have to do anything. So this is what happens. So the first thing we need to understand is the mindset behind every single thing. Now, talking about mindset, I recently did a seminar 2 weeks ago where I was talking to everyone, and I gave them the story. Beautiful story. 2 shoe salesmen go into Africa from Europe. Okay, they get sent in, and they have to send a fax back to discuss the opportunity with their CEOs. So the first person says, this is an absolutely terrible opportunity. No one wears shoes. The second guy sends a fax back saying, this is an absolutely fabulous opportunity. No one wears shoes. Okay. Now, this is an idea. This is giving you an idea of mindset. So when we talk about teams, one of the fundamental problems that most of us don't understand is, do we have a strategy problem or do we have an execution problem? And if you cannot answer this question, you cannot build a high-performing team. Most people don't even have clarity about this. Now, I'm known for one thing. Most people, I specialize the relationship between personality and stress. And I talk a lot about this. And every single time I step into a corporate and I look at the problems that they have, I notice there's one common pattern, is that everyone hires experience over potential. But in the sports teams, we don't do that. We hire potential over experience. Why? I want to tell you something. When you hire experience, you're betting on a similar problem repeating itself. But the world is changing. The world is changing. So when you bet on experience, you're outsourcing responsibility. When you bet on potential, you're a visionary. You see where it's going. You're taking responsibility. The best performing teams identify potential over experience every single time. Because I recently did a show with Wasim Akram and Walker Yunus deconstructing the World Cup, and I always say this. In every single World Cup that's ever happened in any sport, senior people will never win it for you. Senior people will get you to the line, the juniors have to push it over. 21 years. 21 years in elite sport, I've seen it every single time. In a team sport, the senior people will do what is required. They will perform at their average or slightly above it, which gets you to the line. A junior has to step up and push it over the line. That level of courage is needed. So once we start to understand how to look for potential, how to find potential, then things start to happen. Now, this is my dad, and I got to tell you, this is a really funny story. It wasn't funny at the time. I was about 16 years old wanting to play cricket in South Africa, and because I wanted to play cricket, I hated studying. You know, I would have stood no chance in India at all. And my dad kept scolding me. He says, son, you got to study, son, you got to study. And then there was a test coming up. And I went and I did that test, and I got an A+. And I came home and I told my dad, I said, Dad, I got an A+. And he says, son, I'm going to tell you something. Don't take it the wrong way. I wish you failed. So I'm saying, Dad, you're my dad. Why would you wish I failed? I got an A+, aren't you happy? He says, I'm going to teach you a very important lesson, and this lesson has stayed with me from the time I'm 16 years old. He told me, you know and I know you never studied. You know and I know you did zero work. Right? If your brain connects that process to this result, you're doomed for life. You're doomed for life. So when he said that, I hope you fail, my dad was teaching me the importance of connecting the right process to the right result. And I use that up to today, because when one of my athletes goes and happens to be batting and tries one of these reverse sweeps over the keeper, and I've never seen him practice that in there, I am absolutely livid, irrespective of what the result is. Because you have to teach yourself that the right process only will produce the right results. And high-performing teams set and evaluate the process every single time. Now, recently, I'm sure many of you will watch the Euro 24 final on Sunday. England got there. And that hallmark game was that penalty shootout against Switzerland, literally a couple of days ago. Okay. And this image went viral. Okay. And this image shows the keeper, Pitchford, and his water bottle. And on that there, he's got exactly which direction to dive for every single penalty taker in the Swiss team. Now, I'm the head of psychology for the Indian national football team. When I saw that, I know how much of work goes into that. I know we have anywhere between 8 to 10 analysts who watch the last 20 games of every single person. And sometimes the last 20 games where they've taken penalties could go up to the last 40 games as well, where we're analyzing that data before that sheet comes out there. I know that that sheet and the result is not coincidence, and neither is it luck. He didn't happen to jump in the right direction. It was meticulously planned and meticulously studied. And then, high-performing teams, no matter what happens, they trust the process. So you can look at that sheet and not even watch the final, and you can bet your bottom dollar the keeper went in that direction every single time, because high-performing people trust their process. But you can only trust your process if you have a process. Most of us don't even have a process. That is the problem. This is why excellence eludes us every single time. Now, I'm going to come back to neuroscience because this is a fascinating exercise, and time seems to be flying, so my presentation will be cut short in half. But I want every single one of you to imagine you've got your cell phone in front of you. Okay. Your cell phone's there. I want you to imagine, you know, when you open the screen, you get all your apps. So I want you to try to remember what is the app on the top right-hand corner. Think. You open your phone 150 times a day. What's the app on the top right-hand corner? Okay, everyone guess? Got an idea? Great. I'm going to give you guys 5 seconds to quickly go and check if you're right. So quickly go, open your phone, check if that's right, close your phone, put it back in your pocket, or put it down in your lap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Close. Great. Hands up. How many people were right? We got about less than 1% in the room, maybe 2%. Great. About 25 hands went up. So that was not the reason why we did this exercise. I have a question for you. Without looking at your phone, Let me see if it's not up anywhere. Great. Can anyone tell me what the exact time is right now to the minute? The answer is no one will be able to. Because I directed your brain somewhere else. And you would have missed every single thing that was in front. And this is neuroscience. So, if you want to be an exemplary leader, your job is to figure out how to bring what is important to the front and center of your mind every single time. Because there are a million people pulling your attention in a million different directions. Now, there's a beautiful piece of research, and you should make note of this. This piece of research came out in 1976 by Professor Lester Lubowski, and he studied 100,000 patient transcripts, therapist-patient conversations, and he distilled down that every single person on the planet wants the same 6 things. Whether you're a child, whether you're a leader, whether you're a CEO, whoever you are, irrespective of what language it is, you want this. Now, to understand the power of these 6 words, I want you all to think of any conflict you've ever had with anyone. Colleague, wife, husband, child. Think of a conflict very quickly. Small fight, big fight. Get the name in your head, and now spend a few seconds thinking about what that conflict was about. What were you arguing about? Shouldn't take too long. Okay, most of you got it. Now, I'm going to give you the 6 words that every single person on the planet wants. Okay. Now, the first one is they want to be understood. The second, they want to be heard. The third is they want to be seen for what they do. The fourth is they want to be valued. The fifth is they want to be respected as a human being. And the sixth one is they want to be treated fairly. Now, I'm willing to bet every cent I have that the core reason you fought was one of these 6 things was missing. That's how powerful this research is. Now, why is something so simple so difficult? Because so many things are pulling your awareness, exactly like the exercise we did. So in high-performing teams, we have high-performing leaders who are constantly remembering this every single time. And there's another beautiful piece of research where they break up the aspects of dissatisfied employees. And they find that dissatisfied employees they are complaining about salary, work conditions, supervision, all of these things. But the truth is that when you take care of all of these things, it doesn't make them satisfied. Satisfied employees are the ones who are recognized for their achievements, who have autonomy in decision-making, who have great work conditions, who are given responsibility, who get a chance to do what they love. It's a very powerful piece of research. So most leaders seem to walk in and think that if I give you more money, you're going to be satisfied. And because I've given you more money, what the hell are you complaining about? The number one reason that people are satisfied in work is autonomy. The ability to use their own intellect and the ability to use their own decision and given the freedom to execute. Okay. Now, we're going to go into something really interesting and sorry, I have a lot of slides and I'm moving a little quicker than I would normally do it. Now, when we look at high-performing teams, most of us look for diversity. Diversity we try to hire in socioeconomics, we try to hire it in caste, in gender, in all of these things. But that's diversity on the surface. In a high-performing team, when I'm working, I'm trying to cultivate diversity. And I'm trying to cultivate it through the 4 roles that every single person should play. So we have someone who is proposing ideas, and in most teams, that's a senior person or the CEO who's coming and telling you what to do, and everyone has to do it. Then you get the eternal supporter, whether he believes it or doesn't believe it, he will support. Then you get the eternal cynic who doesn't believe anything, no matter what's put on the table. We all know who that is. Sometimes you're like, if he's there, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be a long meeting. And then you get the eternal reflector who, no matter what's happening, is just sitting there. And at the end of the day, 10 years later, you are like, what is this guy actually passionate about? You know? So these are the 4 roles. Now, the truth is that diversity is not different people. Diversity is a science that must be cultivated in every single person. And the way we cultivate it is we teach each person to play every single one of these roles. And the way you do that is by assigning roles in a room. So for example, in my seminar last week, I was we did a beautiful case study where in 5 minutes we picked a sample exercise from the group, and I may do that later in a master class with a few of you, is we pick an idea, and then everyone is a proposer of ideas around that core problem. And in under 3 minutes, I had 30 ideas. Then I switched the lens to everyone becoming an opposer, and then I distilled 30 down to 10 ideas. Then I made everyone an opposer when I said, okay, from these 10, which ones you definitely don't want? And then we distilled it down to 3. Okay? And in 5 minutes, we went from 30 to 3 ideas that we all had conceptual buy-in because we all emotionally contributed towards those ideas. Once we did that, it becomes a decision of do we have an execution problem, do we have a strategy problem, and then we hire for that potential to execute that. It's very, very simple. It's very, very easy. Now, but to be able to do this here, okay, requires something very special. Now, how many people in here listen to orchestral music? Yeah? Have gone to an orchestra? Generally, statistically, they say about 4% of an audience has actually heard anything around an orchestra. Okay, great. And so there's a gentleman called Benjamin Sanders. He passed away a couple years ago. Benjamin Sanders was very famous. He was the maestro at the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. Okay? And an orchestra has anywhere from 80 to about 110, 120 pieces in there. And if you listen to a good piece of orchestral music, you cannot distinguish one person's sound from the other. Everyone in an orchestra is making a contribution. But Benjamin asked himself one other question. He says, an entire audience comes here to listen to music. I am the main person, I'm on the cover of the CD, but I do not produce a single sound. What is my role? He asked himself. And he reflected and reflected and reflected. And he realized and he coined this beautiful term called quiet leadership. And I would recommend that everyone even reads this beautiful book called The Art of Possibility. Because he says quiet leadership, his sound is an amalgamation of the sound that everyone produces. And leadership is that. Leadership has nothing to do with the noise and the sound you make, but leadership is about the platform that you create to allow others to shine. That's the only way a team, that is the only way a team will outperform its role to do this. And I'll give you one beautiful example of how we do this. This is a photograph. I normally put it up and ask people, it's nice and big here. How many Nobel Prize winners do you recognize? One. You know, the interesting thing about the one that most people recognize is he looks exactly the same in every picture, you know? And we're laughing because we all know what it is. No one has a photo of young Einstein. Right? Maybe Netflix, if you watch a documentary, some actor portrayed it in some way. But the truth is that there are 29 people in this photograph, of which 17 of whom have won the Nobel Prize for Physics. But the interesting thing is that when the photograph was taken, only one person was a Nobel Prize winner. There's 17 winners in here because this picture, they were not invited to this picture because they were Nobel Prize winners. They became Nobel Prize winners because they were invited to the picture. There's a science of belonging that says that when you create a psychologically safe space for people, where people feel like they belong, their potential rises. You unlock their greatness. And the science of belonging is very simple. It's 3 words. In a locker room, it's 3 words, which most leaders struggle to abide by and struggle to follow, but it just means equal talking time. That's it, equal talking time. All you have to do as a leader is pass the mic around. You pass the mic around, everyone feels like they've contributed. Even if they have nothing to say, you got to give them the opportunity to say, I pass. Now, my time's up, but I want to show you something. I have some beautiful stories, but let me skip past that. This is an interesting video that I always show. Most of us want to understand the science of winning. The science of winning has nothing to do with the resources you have or anything. So I want you to watch this. Okay. Oh, sorry. It should, they say, how do you get it to play? Maybe you can click it to play there. There. Watch this video. Amazing. Okay, so the beautiful thing about that video is that guy was dead last in the race. If someone who was dead last came to your company and said, you guys are doing it wrong, you'd laugh at him. He figured out that everyone else was doing it wrong. So the first step to success has nothing to do with where you are in the race. It has everything to do with what you see. So the first thing is, when you build a high-performing team, the secret to a high-performing team is not to give them answers, but to leave them with questions. Always, always do this. If you end a meeting with a statement, that's the end. If you end the meeting with a question, you've opened a rabbit hole for greatness. So the first step is awareness. The second step is courage. Now, these three images here you may recognize, may not recognize, but they're exemplary examples of courage. The first one is a banana, exactly what you're seeing, duct tape to a wall. There's a banana at the lunch room. You can take it and do exactly the same thing. But the thing is that the guy who did this got paid 120,000 US dollars for that. He's an Italian artist by the name of Maurizio Catalan. Then the second one is a urinal, exactly like the one in the toilet there. Right? He installed it in a French museum. His name is Marcel Duchamp. Okay, we don't know exactly how much he got paid for it because it was done in 1917. What we do know is that from 1917 to this day, everyone who's installed a urinal in a museum is a plumber. That we know for sure. Okay. And the last one is exactly what you're seeing. Someone's looking at a blank canvas. Literally 18 months ago, a Nordic artist got commissioned to do 2 paintings. He took a check of 80,000 euros and sent 2 blank canvases up. And they put it on the wall. Okay. Now, all 3 are examples of courage. 1 is they saw an opportunity, but 2 is the courage to act. Now, if you want to win as an individual, as a leader, and if you want to create a high-performing team, 1 is you have to see the advantage. And you see the advantage by shifting perspective. The second is you have to give them the freedom to try. Because courage is the only thing that wins it for people. Now, I want to tell you one last thing. I'm going to take 1 minute more. This is a very powerful exercise, based on neuroscience as well. So I want everyone to take one hand and put it up high. Great. Go higher. Higher. Awesome. Great. Well done. So, everyone hands down. The question I have to ask you is, and this is very powerful, this will change your life. Why didn't you put the hands up as high as you possibly could the first time? Why? Every single one of you in the room. You didn't do it because the brain doesn't allow you to do it. I know this as a neuroscientist. I know this when I'm building high-performing teams. You don't know this, but I can tell you one thing, that every effort that you've brought to the table today, or up to today, is a 70% effort. Because the brain, by default, is conservative. It's teaching you to hold back. And the only way to circumnavigate this is to have either an external voice or an internal voice that's saying, go higher, go higher, go higher. So some of you took 3 calls to go as high. Some of you took 2. Some people in your team may take about 25 before they get there, you know. But the truth is that we must understand that no matter what you do, the first effort is never the best effort. This is why people break records on the 3rd attempt at every Olympic event, because the brain brings more, brings more, brings more. But I'm going to end with one thing. One last question, and this isn't, if anyone wants to connect with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or drop any messages there. The question we must ask is, every single one of you in this room is here because you are successful. The question is not about whether you will be successful. The question is about whether you will choose to matter. Do I choose to matter? And there's a difference between success and matter. Success, the camera is pointing in. We're measuring how much money you have and what car you're driving and what title you have and what position you have. But when you evaluate every decision you make in life through the lens of will it matter, you turn the camera around and you start to look at the impact you're making in the lives of every single person. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the most important thing to building a high-performance team and becoming a great leader. Thank you very, very much. And I apologize for going a little extra. Thank you.
Wow, wow.